Multiple offers in a real estate transaction from a buyer's perspective and also a seller's perspective. What's legal? What's ethical? What's the right way to do business? Good morning. My name is Mike Renick. I'm the senior broker, the team lead with Team Renick Real Estate Services, part of that great Keller Williams and the Water family, serving the west coast of Florida. Welcome to Title Time with Mike and Mike, the November 14, 2018 edition. I can't think of a better guest to discuss these topics and more. And I'm going to go through, I really love reading Mike's bio because the biggest thing I like is I know he wants me to shorten it. So he can hear me right now, but he can't chime in. So we'll see where we go on this. The nice thing about Mr. Hankin, he's an attorney. He's just a great guy and very knowledgeable and willing to share that. But he's an attorney with the law firm of Hankin and Hankin. He practices primarily in the areas of residential and commercial real estate transactions. Let me find the one thing that I really like. He's been designated as a board certified real estate attorney, the highest level of recognition by the Florida Bar. So we've shortened that. With that said, he should be a happy camper. Let's bring him into the studio here. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine. Did I do good?
You did well. Thank you for shortening that. I do appreciate it.
Now, this could be one of the most spirited videos we've ever done. I'm excited about this, to be talking about issues like this with someone of your stature. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I wanted to be less of a talking head and have us be more of a talking heads and make this more of a discussion rather than a lecture kind of format. So this week will be a little bit different, a little bit new. We discussed, you announced that we'd be discussing multiple offers today. And there's really two different ways multiple offers comes about, either from a buyer's side in making multiple offers on different properties at the same time, or as a seller in receiving multiple offers at the same time. So we'll take the first situation first. As a buyer, is it legally and morally okay to make multiple offers on multiple properties? Well, let's do the easy one first. And legally, yes, that's fine. There's, as we've discussed in prior videos, two main types of contracts for residential purchases in Florida: the as-is contract and the repair limit contract. The as-is contract gives a buyer an unqualified right to cancel. So as long as a buyer uses that form and cancels within the cancellation period, which is typically 15 days, you can make as many offers as they want. You make 30 offers and decide to go with any number of the accepted offers and cancel any of the ones you don't. It leads to the more difficult question. Well, first, let's go back. If you use the repair limit contract, there's not that unqualified right to cancel. And then a buyer, of course, runs the risk of making multiple offers, having multiple accepted, and having to close on multiple properties or being sued multiple times, which is not a whole lot of fun for that buyer. So if a buyer is going to do this, use the as-is form. Moving to the more difficult question, is this morally right? Is there an implicit representation or kind of position by the buyer when they make an offer to a seller that, hey, I'm interested in your house as the house I want to live in, or the house I want to buy as an investment or whatever, and this is the one I'm looking at? I don't know. That's a moral question. What do you think, Mike?
Here's what we do, because that does happen from time to time. And I make it very clear to the buyer. The one nice thing is we work with buyers and we also work with sellers. So we understand the psychology of both sides of the transaction. And I think that's actually a strength. So we'll set the buyer down and explain, we understand what you're trying to do. I work for you and I'm going to do what you need me to do. But let me just ask you to think about this. If we make 3 simultaneous offers on a property and you're only going to purchase one, the other 2 come off the market during the inspection period. So the seller is losing maybe up to 15 days in many cases, sometimes longer, depending on what we negotiate, of visibility time because it goes under pending. And agents, even when you ask for backups, they typically don't show pending property. So I explain that to the buyer. And I also ask them this question. If I was representing you right now selling your house, how would you feel about that? Every time I've had that conversation with a buyer, they've elected to write just one contract. How is that a non-answer answer, or is that an answer?
It is. And, you know, in my experience too, most people, when confronted with the moral decisions, make what I think is considered the right decision, or what I think most people consider to be what's morally right. It doesn't always happen, and each person needs to make that decision for themselves, but it's an interesting moral question that comes up in multiple offer situations.
And, since it's legal, if a buyer wanted me to go forward, I'm a single agent. I've shared that on many videos. So I'm bound by loyalty, obedience, confidentiality. So since it is legal, I would be required to go forward and make those offers, and I would do so.
And it's an interesting difference between a single agent relationship and a transaction broker relationship, which is the default in Florida. And there's issues of confidentiality that might not exist in a transaction broker relationship. So a lot of ramifications you can really get into with what your different ethical duties are as a broker in those multiple buyer situations. They come up in the multiple seller situations as well, which we encounter really much more often than the multiple offers from buyers. Multiple offers from one buyer. So in the seller situation, a seller will receive multiple offers from different buyers simultaneously. The standard practice is for the seller, through their agent, to notify all of the different buyers that they've received multiple offers, and that to request each buyer to submit their, quote, highest and best, unquote, offer by a certain deadline. The notice, which typically is done on the standard realtor form, says that the seller reserves the right to accept or reject any offer, even the highest and best offers they receive. They can reject all of the offers. They can counter any offer. The addendum basically says legally they can do whatever they want. An interesting discussion with you this morning about this, an interesting discussion with my wife as well, Shannon, about this, and had a couple of different opinions. So I'll ask you, after a seller has requested highest and best offers from different buyers, from the different buyers, and received them, what do you think a seller should do in that situation? Now, legally, they can do whatever they want, but morally, what should a seller do in that situation?
And here's what we actually do. We've been through that. I believe in one of the strengths of being a Keller Williams agent is their goal, their foundation. They live for win-wins. And so at that point, if the highest offer came close, but it didn't hit the line that my seller has to get, remember, I'm working for the seller. I'm a single agent. I'm bound by loyalty, confidentiality, obedience, and that kind of stuff. I would reach out to the representative of the buyer, their agent or their broker, and I would share with them, we're very, very close, but here's what my seller has got to have. Is your buyer interested in terms of coming forward to that level, or is this really it for the buyer? And trying to paint it in a way that everyone, if they accept it, would feel good about it. And that's the approach that we take here.
That makes sense. I don't think there's any wrong answer. Certainly there's no wrong answer for what a seller can do legally, other than, of course, accept multiple offers. They can't accept more than one at one time, at least, again, not without getting sued at the end. To me, it feels it feels a little wrong to counter a buyer's second offer, their highest and best offer. My wife disagrees with me, as sometimes she does like to do. But to me, if a seller goes back to a buyer and says, listen, you've already given me one number, but I've got these other buyers too. I'm not going to mess around and go back and forth with all of you guys. Just give me your highest and best. To me, that's saying, buyer, listen, you're going to lose the advantages of what you would have gotten with negotiating, but you're still going to be able to stay in this mix. You're still going to be able to have your offer considered by presenting your highest and best. If a seller goes back afterwards and says, all right, you've given me two numbers, but give me a third and go up again, to me, it doesn't quite feel right. Now, I think you made a point when we discussed earlier that, well, what if there really is a number that's higher than the best of the highest and best numbers that's not out there? Why should that one of those buyers lose that opportunity? And it's an excellent point. I didn't really have an answer for that one. I don't think there's a lot of right answers in these situations. Certainly on this, my viewpoint is a little bit more conservative than the industry standard and what most agents do, and there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody's got their own opinion.
See, you bring up valid points, and when we get into ethics and morality, there are many times aren't just one right or wrong answer. There could be two right answers or two wrong answers. Here are some of the things we don't tolerate in a multiple offer. If I was to tip my hand to one of the four buyers what I needed and not the other three, that I won't tolerate. I don't know about the legality, but it's definitely not ethical or moral to the standards that I live by. So it's treating everyone fairly and equally. Now, what I'd like to do, I think a seller and a buyer needs a creative real estate broker. So let me share a trick we do when we're representing buyers and we know it's a multiple offer. We will come in many times with an offer that says, I will pay $1,000 more than your highest offer based on proof, not to exceed X dollars. And then I share with my buyer, we've won. Let's just sit back and wait till they figure that out.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's pretty creative.
So, my buyer sets the window of prices they're comfortable with. And of course, I don't tip that to the seller side. I'm representing the buyer in this deal. But my buyer really wants this property. So we can pick 500, 1,000, 2,000, depending on how hot the property is and what price point. If we're dealing with $1 million property or 100,000, the number would be different, but the approach would be the same way. So, so I'll put you on the spot because we hadn't discussed that. Would you find that both legal and ethical, that kind of a offer for me?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think it's creative. I think it works as long as you mentioned, there's a back end, there's a not to exceed price. Yeah, I think that certainly works. Yeah, and as a seller, hey, that's always going to be at least your highest price offer. If your buyer has to get a mortgage or there's other factors, it may not be apples to apples, but yeah, it's a neat way to make sure your number's the highest, and hopefully your sellers appreciate the creativity.
Well, here's the win-win. So my buyer stands a really good chance of getting the property. My seller was just offered $1,000 more than he was going to get with the four offers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't think I've seen it before.
And I've actually used it and I've won.
That's a really neat idea. Hey, I learned something new today. I've been doing this 15 years and hey, not a day goes by I don't learn at least one new thing. So 9:15 in the morning, I guess I can call it a day.
I'm 62 years old, a couple of years older than you, Mike. I say that with all due respect, but I'm learning every single day. But when we can get creative and we can create that win-win at the table where everyone feels they've won, my focus on my side, whether I'm working for the buyer or seller, of course, but if I can create the environment where it's a win-win for everyone, then I feel I've done my job. And creativity is what makes a difference, but it has to be legal. It has to be moral and ethical. I've been offered opportunities to cross that line, and I just won't do it. I won't do a deal that way. I don't need to do a deal. I don't want to do a deal like that, because at the end of the day, you have to hold your head up. And here's what I teach other agents. I cannot control what someone may accuse me of in a transaction, but I can definitely control whether I'm guilty or innocent. Does that make any sense?
A little bit, a little bit. I think that makes sense. And, if you do things the right way, you don't have to worry about them the next day, and you put your head on the pillow every night and close your eyes and you can sleep well. So, it's a good way to do business.
So it's something I feel strong about. This has been a lot of fun. Mike, anything else you'd like to share?
No, I'd like to continue kind of the discussion format, keep you working here Wednesday mornings, and just continue keeping up the discussions and the professionalism. So I look forward to next week.
I love that. I will make an invitation if Shannon would ever like to come on the video and go live with us. I'd be happy to have her join us, and we can have a lot of fun with these.
You let me know how to convince my wife to do things, and I think we'd have a real secret we could sell.
That sounds good. Mike, thank you for everything. You're clearly the best of the best. You teach me something every day, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Have a good one. You too. Bye-bye.